different scientific papers in New Phytologist, Forest Ecology and Management, Journal of Sustainable Forestry, and also in Ecological Economics, interested in green economy. Well, I'm also I'm used to be a forester also, and I have a little farm. But after the 1.5 degrees Celsius report, I've stopped to log on my own forest because it's a boreal forest. It grows very slowly. So then I will try to share the screen and see if possible. There we go. Yeah, then I start. This is the disposition of my little speak here. The important issue, the time factor. It takes several decades for Swedish forests to grow back after felling, to reabsorb the emitted carbon dioxide. This time we according to IPCC, don't have. I will talk a little about climate tipping points, that biofuels delay the necessary change. And the re-establishment of forest has to be more robust towards climate-related damages. We have to renew the forest in a different way, and that the plantation of monocultures that occurs today. I have some solutions then, some changes of forest legislation, a carbon taxation, also biofuels from slow-growing boreal forests. And then I will end up in to put the Swedish forest in a kind of international perspective. And there you see my email address if you want to contact me later on. The most important issue is to stop the emissions from fossil fuels, but also from biofuels before we are passing these climate tipping points. And according to a paper by Will Steffen and some others, there is an increased risk for passing tipping points, points of no return, where the greenhouse effect will go its own way, and it's too late to stop the emissions. So this is why we have to think about biofuels from slow-growing forests in another way. And I don't know, maybe some of you have better numbers on these percentages, but it's about the sources and the sinks, and to say about 80% or so is from fossil fuels, and then we have those emissions from the land, from land areas, from management, forestry management, and also from agriculture. And the sinks, it's the green photosynthetic land areas, forests mostly, and also prairies and savannas and so on. And then we have the sea, the algae in the sea that also absorbs. So about half of the emissions will end up in the atmosphere, and probably if you shouldn't have this this removal of living plants, then the photosynthesis or the greenhouse effect will probably have gone double as fast as today. If we look at possible mitigations ways, then according to this publication, we have a large possibility in forests, both by plantation of former agriculture areas where trees can grow, but also avoiding of forestry. And as you can see, it's quite cheap compared to many other ways to solve the problem. It's a low cost to go below the risk for exceeding of 2 degrees, the darker part of these bars. And we have also a lot of other benefits, not for example, biodiversity. If we leave the forests, if we stop the logging, and also if we renew the forest with mixed forests, then the forest species can move back again, which they can't in the same amounts. A lot of species are just gone from this conversion of former forests to conifer monocultures, which is going on every day in northern Sweden. And also old forests continue to absorb carbon from the atmosphere. After a disturbance, like a forest or like a fire or clear felling, then in the beginning it's an increase in accumulation of carbon from atmosphere, but then the curve flattens out, and it's, if you compare 100-year-old forest with 200-year-old forest, you will have, in average, of course, it's a large spreading between different forests in the world, but on average, it's continue. If you measure above the crowns of the trees in this way, if you take the net between the emissions and the accumulations on the forest ecosystem level, this is not only on the tree level, but it includes also soil and all the herbs on the ground and so on, not only the trees. If you measure on the trees, it may be something else, but it is this curve that is of importance for the greenhouse effect. And then we have this important publication from IPCC, where it has been different modelings and all the lines at different estimations of future impact from pollutions of carbon dioxide. And so what we have to avoid is to cross this red line, because after that we go into a future which we can't control anymore. And then we probably have no chance to stop this this loop of so to say self-managing the greenhouse effect will just go without any control. And it means that within about 10 years from now, we have to decrease the emissions by 25%. And the year 2060, 2070, we have to go down to zero if you follow this, the red thick line there, about there. And so this is the most important thing to do. And if we then look at this figure, which I have taken from a publication from a researcher in SLU, Thomas Lundmark, he has estimated the climate impact from today's forest and compared it with no more logging. And it takes about 140 years until those curves crosses. And we have in the Sweden, we should go down to zero 2050. So we're all too late. And if we have a kind of intensive forestry with much of fertilization and so on, then it will take maybe 80 to 100 years before the lines, the curves are crossing. But it's also too late. If we then see at SLU's greenhouse reporting to this this numbers are also reported to EU and to the estimate of emissions from land and wetlands and grasslands and forest lands. And you can see the total emission is minus 43.2 million tons carbon dioxide per year from the forest. But and it's due to that the living biomass, the growth of trees are much faster than the logging of trees. And we have also a net gain by some forest projects that are built into houses and so on, about 6 million tons according to this. But what's not reported, the numbers that are missing here, is the effect on emissions from the products produced in forests and from the twigs and branches that are rotting on the clear cuts. So, and I asked people who's working with this, and the reason is that the EU rule says that renewable energy sources should not be reported. And forests are considered as renewable energy. So those numbers are just missing. So I and some other researchers, we have tried to figure out what's missing here. And it's this figure, and it's in, I couldn't translate it to English directly, so I have to speak a little about it. And we have based this on what's the name in English? Riksskogstaxeringen. It's a report, an inventory of the growth of trees in Sweden that is done very intensely, so to say, every year. And then we have transformed from cubic meter grown of trees into to tons of carbon dioxide. It's a simple formula to go from tree to carbon dioxide. So we have a growth of about 175 million tons of carbon dioxide per year, and then the logging causes the logging is about 125 million tons carbon dioxide per year. And then this logging is, so to say, the timber is processed, and we have about 12 million tons is left in sawn products, and then in stumps, roots, and so on, 31 million tons, which is also left during 10 years. We have estimated this for 10 years because we should halve the emission according to 1.5 degrees report until 2030. So therefore we have 10 years. And then we have short-lived, and it's the twigs and branches and needles and leaves that are left after logging. But it's also black liquor that is used as biofuel in the paper mills. And it's also biofuel that are used for heating or warming of cities in Sweden and houses and so on. And so this is 82 million tons, which is directly emitted to the atmosphere, 82 million tons. And this 82 million tons could, for example, be compared with all other emissions in the Swedish society, which amounts about 53 million tons from traffic, from flight, from other industry, and so on. So the direct emissions from the from the forest sector is about 30 million tons larger. But we have also estimated the loss of growth, because if you fell trees, then there are less of trees that can continue to grow. And it's about 4.6 million ton carbon dioxide per year. And if we multiply this 10 years, then it's 46 million tons. So if we look at the report, the Swedish reporting to EU, territorial emissions, then what's reported is from the land sector is a sink of about 43 million tons, which is the yellow bar going down. And then we have the emissions from traffic and from flight and other things. So if I then put this 82 million tons into this presentation, then we can, instead of having a sink, we have a net emission of about 47 million tons. I have in this also included that we have an import of timber from other countries of about 8 million cubic meter per year. And we have also probably other effects. I have not included the effect from ditching, because that was included in the inventory report. But we have also a smaller effect on humus that are decomposed on the clear cuts due to the logging, but it's not that much. It's about 1 million ton per year, so it's not that much. It's mainly the short-lived products from the tree felling, from the trees, that these 80 million tons. Here we see from Swedish, different kinds of Swedish industries, all the Swedish industries, so to say. And the largest emission comes from black liquor used as biofuel in the paper mills, paper production. It's we have estimated it to 30 million tons carbon dioxide per year, but it could be, I have also seen little lower and higher numbers also estimates. And the second largest industry emissions comes from steel and metal production. It's a little more than 5 million tons. So it's more than twice emissions of greenhouse gases from the chimneys of the paper mills compared to the total Swedish traffic sector. In some other countries, for example, in USA and in Germany, and so they use straw from rest products from the agriculture instead of trees. And in this way, we can leave more of the trees in the forest. It's a Canadian study that has estimated that it will halve the global ecological footprint. They didn't only count on carbon pollution, but also other effects, the total global ecological footprint. And it will be half as large if you use, in Canada, straw from wheat, and I think they had also some other products that they used from agriculture, and compared it to poplar and Canadian spruce, I think. So it's in a way, but I'm not a chemist or an engineer, so I don't know the exact way to do this. But it could be because this also produces black liquor, and we have to, maybe we can carbonize it and use the black liquid, put it back in the soil again, and then store it forever, so to say. this terra preta method, which has been used in South America for thousands of years. So is there any kind of logging that we can continue in Sweden with if we look at the long-term climate perspective? Well, it must be biofuels which production and consumption can contribute to a decrease in emissions of carbon dioxide to the atmosphere. Does these trees exist? I don't know. It hasn't been investigated. Is there any biofuel from trees in Swedish forest that could be placed inside this frame? If so, which one? It also needs to be answered. Could we, for example, pick out really large trees which have a high content of sow products, because the trees are round and the surface is anyway go to paper production. And if we have a larger inner part, then we will have more sound product that can be stored in houses, for example. But if this is the answer, then we have to change the forestry management, because in the clear cutting they cut both large and small trees. Then a larger part is also directly going, or within a year, out in the atmosphere. Should we thin the forest? Probably not, because small trees can't grow back. So probably we have to stop the thinning and the clear cutting and maybe use some other method. I'm not sure. Then we have the second part of my presentation. Now I talked a little about this time factor and the logging and what can be logged or not. But we have also already clear cut a large part of Sweden, and it's a lot of clear cuts and it's a lot of very young forests. Most of the forest in forest land in Sweden has trees that are younger than maybe 40, 50 years. And we have large parts, especially in northern Sweden, which is not planted yet, which we still can plant with mixed of forest. So what is also very important is to make the growing upcoming the future forest more resilient towards the climate change and its effect, which probably will come anyway. And then it's a failure, I think, to do the way we do it today. Just convert mixed forest or semi-natural forest, which is the major part of the. We have transformed, I will say, of about 35–40% of the forest north from Riverdal-älven to single species conifer plantations in different ages since 1950 about. So, but it's maybe 50–60% of the area is left, which is still semi-natural forests. Then we have the natural forest, which just a few percent close to the mountains. The rest is very affected. So it's better to replant or regenerate natural regeneration, for example, to get back such a semi-natural forest as you see at the photos below here. So if we don't do it, it's probably what will happen is that massive attacks of fungi or insects and so on will just wipe out these monocultures. It has happened before. This Gramineella abetina, which is a fungi, affects pine and not spruce, as you see, and not deciduous trees. And if you have monoculture, it will just spread and kill off the trees. A few kilometers from this place, it was this, what you call, old managed farmer forests with mixed forest of deciduous trees and spruce. They were almost not affected at all. And this is an investigation made on Pinus lodgepole pine. So it's planted from North America. But anyway, we have the same effect in Scotch pine also. And the more a mix in of deciduous trees, the less of infections of this fungi. So it's very efficient to prevent that the new forest is killed off. We have also wind effects on forests. For example, this storm, Gudrun, in 2005, when about 75 million cubic meter trees felled in 2 days or so. It's off about the same amount of felling as in entire Sweden during 1 year. The cost was estimated to about 15 billion crowns. And when investigations was done after the storm, and when they compared protected forest with mixed trees, oak trees and spruce and so on, birches, with this spruce monoculture, the production forest, the amount of wind fells was about 5% in the protected areas and 20 to more percent in the other areas. It's a lot of fungi that affect spruce, especially spruce, and especially in southern Sweden. But if you mix in when you plant, you can bring, so to say, both spruce and pine seedlings on the clear cuts and mix it. What's happened is that I have recently, I and some colleagues from different other European countries, just a week ago, we published a paper in Forest Ecology and Management where we showed that pine is growing faster if it's mixed together with spruce compared to in monocultures of pine. But the spruce is growing slower, but you will faster get timber if you mix spruce and pine, which can be of importance because then you can get more of long-lived products in the production of timber. And this quite recent knowledge that we didn't know before. It's just a new publication. But here they have compared the effect of inmixing of spruce together with seedlings of pine, and it's the butt root. It's a kind of infection on spruce. It also affects pine, but not that much as spruce. So if you mix in, because those root tips spread. So if it's spread, if you have a pine between the spruces, then you stop some of the spreading at least. And this is the effect that then in an admixture, the percentage of at least old spruces that are infected is much lower. If we mix in deciduous trees in conifers, then also we will probably decrease the risk for large fires. It affects large parts of the boreal part of the northern hemisphere. In 2018, it was a dry year, and it was a lot of fires in northern Sweden especially. And in this publication, consuming fires, it means that those who just burned the forest totally is about 25 times lower in deciduous trees, deciduous than in conifers. But of course, we have also an effect of that deciduous trees often grows more in wetter conditions compared to conifers. So it could be also an effect of that. It's many things that influence it, of course. But I think this is an important publication in Nature and Climate Change because they propose a way to solve this problem actually. In Canada, for example, they use it a lot to plant deciduous trees or not thin out deciduous trees in the forests. But it's not done in Sweden. I mean, they only convert the forest to monocultures of spruce. Spruce in southern Sweden and pines in northern Sweden. Another way to prevent emissions of greenhouse gases is to dam ditches in the forests. The effect on, if we count on carbon dioxide equivalents, because it's 4 variables involved in this. If you dam a ditch, then the growth of the trees around will decrease, but you will prevent the emission of carbon from decomposing peat. But you will also, if you not do it in the right way, if you dam it totally, not just leave a little 5-10 centimeter surface dry, then it's a risk for that the damming increasing the emissions of methane. But if you leave a little dry surface, then this will be oxidized, so it will carbon dioxide with a lower climate impact. But another factor is also this NOx, nitrogen oxides, which will prevent the emission of them also prevented when you dam. So the net effect is, according to SLU, about 6.4 million tons per year. We have also an emission from agricultural land in Sweden of about 4 million tons per year. So in total, about 10 million tons per year, and it's close to the emissions from the private traffic, private cars traffic in Sweden. And this is a very rapid way to do it. I used to do it myself. I have bought some forest land from the Swedish state, and they had ditched a lot. So I and my son, we used to go out practicing this in the summers. And I think we have prevented tons and tons of emissions just with a spade. It's very easily done. I also spent some weekends with some friends, and they like to do something direct. They can see that here I do in my hand. I can see it with my eyes that I actually doing something. Okay, then we go to another issue, another question. It's also important for the climate to save deciduous trees and to change the management in Sweden due to the fact that deciduous tree reflects more light and become a little bit cooler during summer. The atmosphere layer just above the tree crowns is still covered. It's more moist, and it's less of heating from absorbing of dark areas of heat, so to say. So we have a difference here. And according to this publication in Science, since the year 1750, the largest impact from forestry has not been connected to the carbon cycle. It's an effect from that they have replaced former deciduous forest with conifer forest. And it's an albedo effect that has been largest, actually. So what can we do? We have to try to get the politicians to change the Swedish forestry legislation and to adaptate to the climate situation. Include legislation about mixed forest instead of planting monocultures of only spruce or only pine, and probably also start an ecological restoration of clear cuts and conifer monocultures. What can we do to get it back to kind of mixed forests? We have to start from count from the global carbon budget. We have just a few decades, well, 20, 30 years to do this. If so, can some trees continue to be felled in the future? And we have to state the legal text which about in which case we can continue to log, and which trees, and limit the felling to these. We have also to include, of course, a lot of social measures, also internationally, to avoid rebound effects. It's very important. We have to make a kind of interdisciplinary research and take contact with politicians and start to stop the competition between paper companies and so on. Start them to cooperate around to leave forest and use straw from rest products from agriculture, but also have an agriculture where you leave a lot of organic material in the soil, and it can also be done. We have to make an addition to the Forest Management Act on requirements for reforestation with mixed forests that can grow. Now this is totally free. It's totally free for forest companies just to cut down all forest I mean, it's all the way to the horizon. If I travel by cars here around where I live, the neighboring, just a few years ago, it was ordinary forests. Now it's just totally clear cuts all the way to the horizon, and it's mile after mile. It's just the last years. I have lived for a long time in this place. I'm born here, and now it's just a mess. The total nature is just exploited, and then it's rows with only pine plants on these clear cuts. We have to legislate about rewetting of previously ditched forest wetlands. If we look at compared Sweden with other countries, it looks about the same. It's the same clear cuts. And if we compare with Russia and Norway, and this is the Barents region, and here is the road net, and it's forest roads for getting access to the areas and clear cut it and bring out the timber and convert it into pine plantations. If we compare a part of the county of Västerbotten, this is Vilhelmina municipality, which is a large part actually of inland here in Västerbotten County. In 1958, it was almost only old forest, the dark green, and we have the blue is lakes and the white is peat bogs. And then they started the conversion of the industrial forestry, and the yellow color is clear cuts or plantations of mostly of pine. So now we have a almost complete change of the area. The protection of forests is very low in Sweden. This is 2015. Now I think about 6% of the productive Swedish forest is legally protected. But if you compare it from countries in South America and Africa, they have much larger proportion of their forest that is protected. So we are a rich country. It's very bad to protect our own nature. So we shouldn't complain on Brazil, for example, Bolsonaro. It's a lot of discussion going on. We should stop logging there. We're doing the same here around Kroknäs, where I sit. Holmen, they are just totally exploiting the forest, fell it, and it's no one stops it. And if you look at those who pollute, it's we, the rich people in the world. About 10% pollutes about 50% of the greenhouse gases. This is also an important publication, which is quite recent, just some month ago that it was published. And it's a proposal to a solution where should bring down the consumption and increase the use of energy from not only fossil-free techniques, but carbon dioxide-free techniques, which is very important. If we double the amount of carbon dioxide free techniques like windmills and direct sun energy compared to today, and if we bring down the consumption in rich countries by 60 to 90%, it will be a consumption like in Sweden in the 1960s. Then we could, according to this estimate, also increase the population to 10 billion people, and we can have a decent living, everyone in the world. So it's possible, but what has to be done is to cut down this top a lot. This IPET equation, I have put it there so you know maybe about this. We cannot only work with the techniques, forestry or fabrics or so. We have also to look at the population and the affluence. Otherwise, we can't solve it. This is my end. I think it's my last slide here. Politics are conducted on national, regional, and municipal level, but the climate problem is global. The companies and the consumers, the market, are focused on short-term economic profit and increased consumption. The Swedish Companies Act or the forest management legislation takes no consideration to climate. It's not written anything in these law texts about the climate. Politicians in Sweden and the world take responsibility for quickly changing and the regulation, and we had to climate adjust the forest management law, but it has to be synchronously adjusted to other aspects, social aspects, financial aspects, and so on. It's very important to link the carbon dioxide taxation to a different fuels' ability to avoid climate tipping points. Economic steering instruments must be quickly linked to this time factor. Then fuels from forest with a long carbon payback period should be taxed as fossil fuels. Owners of slow-growing trees should also provide greater financial compensation for carbon storage to leave the forests and to dam the ditches and so on. And I and some other people from other universities, we wrote an article 2 weeks ago in the French newspaper Le Monde, where we suggested these solutions to EU. Okay, I stop here. Questions?
Thank you very, very, very much, Stig Olof. Please, everyone, just possibly raise your hand first or something, so no one speaks in someone else's mouth. Also, Casimir first out, please.
Steve, could you stop sharing screen so we can see everyone?
Okay.
Well, I have posted some notes in the chat here.
Yes.
I think it's a need to understand the IPCC, the reporting using the IPCC guidelines, that biofuels are not reported having any emissions reported under energy sector, but it is included in the LULUCF sector as just as part of the carbon stock change of the forest and soils. So in Sweden, we have a carbon stock change of 43 megatons, as you said, Stig Olof. And the harvest, yes, of course, the harvest, these are large numbers that the photosynthesis each year could accumulate. So we harvest less than the photosynthesis. So the harvest, yes, it is a lot of loss due to short-lived products. But I think we also want to harvest the forest for long-lived products like building houses and so on. And for getting timber for housing, it is also a lot of products going into short-lived paper products and so on. So we have to discuss how will we use the forest in a sustainable way for both the society and for carbon storage in the system. So I think that's important.
Yeah, but it's I agree with you that we have to find a way. You know, I had put some slide where I have some questions. I don't know which timber is possible to log them in that way. We don't know it really, because it's probably like that for example, what we did in our calculating was that we used Gustafsson and more their publication about to exchange cement products or the building of houses with what is that? Cement and so on. With trees instead, and tree instead, and we found then that it was a substitution effect of about 1.8 million tons. So it also included in our numbers. But if we could increase the relative amount of long-lived products, then it would be better, of course, than the today situation. I can give an example how I think. I have some large pine trees staying on in my forest, and it's time to it's actually naturally seeding trees on a clear cut, and I thought that maybe I should fell them and sell them to Holmen or a factory which produce such what you call limträ. It's a kind of special tree that up in Big Siljan that they use to build houses with, and then we can decrease the production of cement and so on. But then I came to think about if we build a new house, then more energy is used for heating or for air conditioning. So after a while, independently what the walls are made of, then we will increase the greenhouse effect by building new houses. That doesn't matter. So then we have to also make those houses as zero energy houses or plus energy houses. So we can't stop this planning just within the forestry industry sector. We have to make very carefully planning and life cycle analysis, and also change the way of building. Otherwise, I shouldn't. So I decided to not log the trees. But then we have another factory where they make such what you call telephone poles, and they are still round. They just take off the bark and the surface, and they are also impregnated to stand in 100 years and so on. So I thought maybe I should fell the trees and sell them there instead. But if I fell these pines, then I stop the growth of the trees. They're still growing, so they're still accumulating carbon from the atmosphere. So my decision now is not to log them. So this is, I think, such an example is the way we have to think if we should think about take responsibility for this short time. It's just a few years until we have to stop the emissions in the atmosphere. But so the time aspect is making everything different. and I mean, I have been logging trees for 30 years, using machines and so on. I had to start to think another way. So, but we have to sit down and figure out a good plan for this. It's my answer.
Could I say something on this?
Yes. Yeah.
I will leave soon. I think, yes, we have a short time span here of 10 years or something, but we need to understand the arguments of the Swedish industry, how they have different concepts, as you mentioned, this substitution concept, which is an argument for felling trees. So if you fell a tree, you could avoid using fossil fuels. But I think this is no longer an argument. If not allowed to use any fossil fuels, then we can never replace the fossil fuels by felling trees. And yes, we should instead let the forest be older. Now we fell the forest at 70, 80 years of age in Sweden. But if we wait until it's a little older, then we could store more carbon in the forest. But in contrast to this, the forest industry wants to fell the forest at younger ages because then they get more money out of the forest. So we should be aware of what the forest industry are, the arguments they use, I think.
Yes, they use this argument for subsidizing, but I mean, it's just that you change one emission with another emission. So you, instead of using oil, you put about the same amount of carbon in the atmosphere from the forest.
Yeah, I agree to that, but they
yes,
argue
they
zero.
have this argument, but there's also another thing happen. If you fell the trees, you also stop the photosynthesis. So also this vacuum cleaner that cleaned out from the atmosphere, we cut some of them off, so to say. So it's a double failure. Yeah, I know the argument. Thank you. We can take the next question maybe.
I will leave now. So
thank you very much, Åsa.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Alistair, you've been quite onto the chat group as well. Maybe you want to have a few words.
Firstly, I would like to say, Stig Olof, thank you for a really excellent presentation. I'm still trying to digest it all because there's a lot of this topic is very new to me. I want to, before I ask you a science question, I want to focus on one of the things you just said in your answer to the last question, that about learning, even at our age, and you're looking at how to handle the trees on your plot on your land, and I think it reflects beautifully what the young people today say, that no one is too old to learn. And I thought of that when you said that. I thought that was really excellent, Stig Olof. And I think everyone in this forum is here figuring we're here to learn. You said lots of things which I am learning from. So, and I'm just going to ask for one of my many things I want you to help me understand. This was, you talked about straw, using straw, and I think it is, and why we don't do that in Sweden. I'm wondering, what is the straw actually used for? Because I mean, I don't know anything about agriculture, but I mean, we've got a lot of farms, we must have a lot of straw. Why don't we use that instead of trees? What's the hindrance?
Straw is, I think, I'm not into that so much, but I think, for example, in Denmark, which is a big agriculture country, they use it for biofuels, some of it. I think also some of it could be used as food for horses or something. I'm not sure really, but some of it is also left. It's also difficult because it's already used in some countries, but in other countries, I think a lot of it is also left. And we have in a lot of, for example, in China, I think they use straw from rice, and we have this corn in North America. So it's only not only barley or oat or so, but we have a lot of other. I mean, I showed a picture that the production is from wheat is about 6 million tons, and the human consumption of paper is about 400 million tons. But you had to add to the wheat also all other products. For example, if we should use cellulose or so from legumes, which can provide a lot of proteins also that we can use instead of meat, then we will have also another positive influence on this from this. So it's many steps all the way. It's like a food web. If you take it in one part, then it happens something in the other.
Very, very. Thank you, Stig Olof. Am I allowed to ask one more question?
Yeah.
Stig Olof, one of the things you've taught us today is that, and you can correct me if I've misunderstood the lecture, but that mixed plantations are, for numerous reasons, better than monocultures. And then I want to ask the question, I mean, for me, who doesn't do forestry, it seems, well, why don't we just plant mixed plantations? What's the hindrance? What's stopping us doing that today? It seems like such a simple solution. What am I missing as a non-expert?
I think it's old traditions. They started up with a kind of industrial thinking, and you should use the forest more or less the same way as in agriculture. And in agriculture, we have fields with only oat or wheat or so. And then we should also do the same way it's an old tradition in Sweden to do this. But technically, it's not difficult because you have 2 cassettes on the hips when you go out. So you can, they only buy pine. You can also buy some cassettes with spruce. And in some places on the clear cut, it's maybe better conditions for spruce also. But in some land, for example, on the moors, on the sand moors here in northern Sweden along the rivers, it's only sand. And then we have natural monocultures of pine. So whatever you plant there, it will die if you don't have pine. So it has to be a table in this legislation where you have the conditions on the place, and then suggested type of mix of trees, which is the best. And this is very easy. I can write it down. I mean, I know about this, how the different conditions are in Sweden. In southern Sweden, we have another type of legislation. It's this legislation about that forest owners are forbidden to replace mixed forest with some kinds of deciduous trees, oak and ash and so on. If they are in a certain percentage of them on the ground, you are not allowed, according to the law, to replace them with only spruce. But I think this legislation could be used, a similar legislation, all the entire country. It's no difficulty. But we have a very hard resistance from the forest companies, which have this, they call it very simple management. They import people that works from other countries which they pay low salary. And to inform them how to do this in a mixed way it could be other languages. So they have these huge machines that just clear cut everything. And then they just rent some people from Africa and so on. I met those in Howard Forest, and then they go there and they plant just one plant, one type of seedling. So that is what's going on. It's just it's no limit on the craziness, I would say, what's going on here.
Stig Olof, I will shut up and let someone else in, but I want to share a reflection with you based on what you said. I would love to see you writing a policy brief explaining how to plant wisely. I think that would be super useful because you're in a very unique position, both having grown up and knowing and understanding and living forestry. So you're part of the community and you're also an expert, which means your voice is worth more than many, many people. So I would really, really encourage you put that guidance down in a policy brief that maybe comes out of Umeå University or come to us at the Boleyn Centre or whatever. We'll try and find ways of getting it out there because it sounds like super important information that can help.
Can you please send me an email later on and we can continue? Yeah, continue.
I promise, Stig Olof.
It takes a matter.
We had a few questions in the chat group, especially from Åsa, who had to leave. So I will read one. In the meanwhile, someone else might get themselves ready to ask a question. In Sweden, we have a carbon stock change is net uptake of 42 million tons carbon dioxide equivalent. Cannot be directly compared with the loss from harvesting trees. Of course, lower harvest rate will store more each year, coming to a new steady state. Harvested wood products and all the carbon stock categories are included in the inventory. Why not bioenergy is included as such is due to rules of not double counting in the IPCC guidelines. Maybe you could see the question yourself as well. My English well.
Yeah, you can see. Yes, but this, so to say, the emissions from black liquor, for example, about 30 million tons per year, and from other use of biofuels is not reported in the inventory. It's not reported. So what's reported is the natural. And when I asked about that, it's because they consider it as a renewable energy source, and then it's not reported. So it's a missing. We are putting out. If we compare with that, we should not log the forest with the logging. So the anthropogenic effect on the forest, it's the direct effect is about 82 million tons per year in Sweden, and it's not reported.
Can I ask another question? Well, as no one else has come with a question, am I allowed? I'm trying to get. I want to go back to mixed forests. You told us that mixed forests reduce the risk of forest fires. Now that's something I don't understand at all. Why is it different if there's different types of trees?
Well, to some degree, because deciduous trees are the leaves and the tree crown are moister. It's more of moist in the air. For example, in Umeå, the nearby city where we have the university, it was a large fire in 1888, where only the chimneys were left. All the entire city was burnt down. And after that, the politicians in Umeå decided to plant birch trees along the streets. So now we call it the city of the birches in northern Sweden. And the reason was to prevent the fire to leap from over the streets. And in Canada, they plant deciduous trees around cities to prevent. So if we should leave some barriers or so in the and also dam back some wetlands, renovate them, then we can probably at least decrease the risk. Of course, if it's such firestorms, I think it could burn all. But maybe we can stop the initial part of fires and so on.
That's a really brilliant thing to say. I really appreciate that a lot, because then I mean, I'm thinking the Griscom study which you showed, one of the things they include is avoiding forest fires as one of the ways of combating climate change, and you're kind of doing it. But it seems mixed trees are a really good way to go based on that. Thank you very much. There's lots of people with more questions now.
Can I add something about the flammability of deciduous? It's because surface fuels are really important, and under coniferous trees you have mosses, which are good surface fuels, and under deciduous trees the leaves just decompose and you don't have good surface fuels. And then the coniferous trees, the needles are full of oil, so they are really high energy content in the needles, and the composition of the trees with the branches, like if you have branches all the way, like in the contorta pine, you have branches from the ground and up, then it's much more flammable kind of vegetation.
Yeah, thank you.
I see Niklas has raised his hand.
Yes, thanks, Stig Olof. That was brilliant. I really appreciated this, and I very much agree with what you said. And so I have a couple of questions and maybe a couple of just quick thoughts as well. I mean, I think it's kind of this kind of sense of being an unreal sense, right? Like you have this kind of thrust of this forestry and this kind of truth of bioenergy being a climate solution and neutral. And yet, as you've really clearly laid out, you can debunk this. And it's a fundamental kind of truth in a way. It's almost like we're playing with different truths here. And so I think one piece that I would like to really figure out more and maybe have conversations on is with many of you here is how we can effectively communicate, you know, the essence here, the sort of very basic kind of take-home messages that you present. Because if you do that and understand the way also you need to look at the carbon in the trees very differently from fossil carbon, obviously. You know, a lot of things fall to pieces in a way, but it's kind of, it's mystified. It's hard to understand for a whole lot of people. So I think that's like a pedagogical communications task that would be really interesting to find ways to illustrate and you know, communicate in ways that can actually translate into action. Because as we see it, the forestry industry, not the least, they are conveniently pushing these truths, as you said, and they get away with it and nothing changes and we have very little time. So that's one piece. And I think what we also need to understand is how this plays into the whole unfolding again of markets and offsets and carbon trading, and how this also plays into the trees being there as a way of offsetting for net zero goals. And I just want to kind of flag that piece as well of the major problems in these sort of distance net zero goals that are all, many of them training back to, of course, the idea that you can use trees in this way. And I'll just paste a link here to a report I was part of doing that might find interesting in terms of kind of dealing with a net zero discussion as a side. Then a couple of just quick questions. I'm sitting up in Härjedalen, right next to the mountains.
Yes. Yeah.
And I remember growing up in the, you know, what was that, 80s maybe, the whole struggle against logging in fjällnära skogar was one of the sort of alarm clocks for me. And I look around here and there's all these clear cuts in a very, very seemingly kind of fragile forest. So I'm just keen to hear from you, like, what is the implications in this part of the country in terms of logging and clear cuts even? You know, is there any, you know, how much destruction does that entail really, and the sort of implications of that? And the other side is, I remember visiting the second biggest private owner of forests in Germany, who had really taken to heart exactly your analysis and said, I've stopped, I'm only doing selective logging and very kind of surgical kind of interventions in my forests. So that's the other question I have, how, granted that you don't just leave every forest to become a natural sort of, old growth forest, what is the prospects for doing the kind of selective logging, and when you have an industry radically transformed, but still, sort of thriving with no clear cuts whatsoever. So keen to hear the comments on that. Thanks so much.
Yeah. So yeah, the first question was, you have seen a lot of clear cutting also up in the mountain forest around where you are now, or yeah. I think that it's in the main part of the protected and remaining native forest is along the mountain, and most of the protected forests are there. So what you have seen is probably, it could be some private owned forest that is not state owned, which is still allowed to log, but the legislation have minimum sizes on clear cuts, for example, in the mountain area, which is not in the rest of Sweden. So it's some restrictions actually. And we have from the environmental movement part, we succeeded to save a lot of forests in the 1980s in the mountain area. I started up an organization with some other authors and so on already in 1984. It was also people from Die Grünen in Germany that was involved in this. And we succeeded actually to stop the logging because the German Springer concern, which buy a lot of paper from Sweden, boycotted Swedish paper. So it was a pressure from other countries that succeeded to stop the logging of the mountain forest, the last wilderness in West Europe, I would say. So this FURA, Fjällnära urskogars räddningsaktion, I and some others, I was a young student, we had a big success. So it's possible, but you have to use impact from other countries and big companies that think in another way than Swedish companies. And the second question about selective logging, it's a various a lot of different methods for this. The Lübeck model and Mats Hagner's natural culture and so on, and so we have these possibilities. And I have before I stopped logging, I used this kind of methods also, depending on the ground and so on, different kinds of methods. But it's also some difficulties with this because you have to go by the machine's longer ways. You have to have longer, small forest roads to pick trees with the machine, so to say. And it costs them more to log in that way. And the companies are not fond of it because it costs a lot to log compared to just clear cut the entire area at once. But in a way, we have to also discuss economy and subsidies and so on and overcome these problems. It's a lot of such hindrance for this to get an acceptance. And I think we have to sit down with companies from Sweden, but also if we're talking about these paper mills, for example, Swedish SCA is a multinational company which competes with, for example, Domtar Corporation in USA and South Asian Pulp and Paper Group in Asia and so on. So we have to bring those the leaders of those companies to sit down and talking about a new global solution where we also involve farmers so they can also be paid a little more for straw and so on. And this is very important that leading politicians take the responsibility to start up this action. We can not only say from the Green Mountain stop logging, we have also to serve them a solution how to do it. So and it's in the small scale and it's a big scale. How to log in the forest, but also how to trade in another way on the global level. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm thinking about horsepower. Mie, welcome.
Thanks. I'm partly just really interested in how statistics distort, how you report figures distorts completely what we see. I mean, this, you've just shown us this most incredible hole in what's reported. And I was also thinking about the fact that they've edited away air transports and communications and all sorts of things out of the other statistics so that people don't understand. But the other thing that I'm really hung up on is the paper industry use of black liquor. And that's the height of those carbon emissions where everything else kind of just disappears. And are you saying that if we manage to use food waste, for instance, like peelings and stuff that comes off the stalks of wheat and things like that, we could replace the need for fibers in the paper industry and the use for black liquor to create the paper, the energy input, and that would kind of basically halve our carbon emissions?
Well, as I mentioned before, I'm not a technician, so I just have some guesses, I will say, about this. I agree with you that it's an enormous pollution from this paper mills compared to steel industry and all other industries in Sweden. But also, if we use straw, we will get a rest product as black liquor, because we have also lignin in other plants than in trees. It's much more in trees, but it's also some lignin. So, and to get rid of that, maybe it's a kind of idea, I'm not sure about it. But if they also, in this industrial process, they reuse the chemicals in the black liquor. It's a lot of potassium and so on that they have to take back in the process. And then the rest is this remnants from lignin in the timber. But I have an idea about maybe we could, so to say, have a kind of carbon capturing also without using energy to make the carbon molecules, which are to a dense liquor, and then send it to Norway in the bedrock or so. Maybe we could just extravate it from when we have cleaning off the chemicals and then make it into to carbon directly. I mean, this what do you call it, biocarbon. It's possible to do it, and then we can have it back to the, just spread it out on land. We don't have to put it in a bedrock or somewhere. So, but it's my fantasy. I'm just thinking free. So this is also kind of a way of also getting rid of carbon from the atmosphere, but because carbon capturing techniques could be a part of a solution, maybe another way. But it's a lot. I mean, if you should replace it only with waste from agriculture and so on, maybe it wouldn't be that much. But we can also take the outer surface from large timbers that are selectively logged and mix it together in some way. Probably it would be, and then we also decrease the of course the consumption of paper, which has already happened a lot. They have to close down some paper factories just last week, I think, in Sweden, because the consumption of paper has gone down a lot in the export countries. Sweden export about 90%, you know. So what's happening in Europe, in England, and in France, and so on, it's also very important. If we got those customers to buy paper from straw produced in the world, then there would be a pressure also on the factories to do it another way. But I think economic steering is the important, and then we have the technicians and the economists. They can do the rest. We have to put the framework around economically. Then they fixed it some way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think Alexander has a question, but I'm going to let Alistair in first, because I think you have a direct question to this.
Yeah, it's. I just want to make sure I've understood what you said, Stig Olof, because if I've understood it, it sounds really super. Do I understand right that you say it might be possible to extract biochar from black liquor in the paper industry?
I have not. I have it just an idea. I haven't. It's nobody. I haven't read any paper about it or so. But if I should guess, maybe it's possible. I think it's an idea to investigate it at least.
That's something we have to follow up. That sounds a really, really exciting potential. Thank you.
So please give us your oddball question, Alexander. I look forward to hearing an oddball question.
Yeah, I actually follow up on Alistair's question.
Yep.
So basically, your idea is to not only use biofuels in terms of, I don't know, for whatever, burning, heating, but also to remove part of the carbon you get from that. Because I have never heard about that.
No, it's I mean, if we should use straw instead of small trees, for example, then it will be a rest product of black liquor, and so we have also to solve that second problem. And then I have just some fantasies about it, so to say. It's nothing I have learned from some engineers or something. So it's just an idea.
Okay, so if you say rest product, you mean that could not be used otherwise? So it would be some residual.
Today they burn it.
Okay.
I mean, today they burn it to get energy and to replace oil.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's a kind of biofuel.
So instead of burning, you would basically suggest to remove it in a way to.
Yeah. Yes. If you make bio coal, then you can also extract some energy, and it will pollute a little carbon, but not in the same way if you burn it all.
Okay.
So bio coal is actually a way to store carbon molecules for thousands of years, and you don't have to pump it down in the bedrock in Norway or somewhere.
Okay.
You can just spread it on agriculture, and it will improve the growth also of wheat and so on. If you put more of coal in the soil, and prepare it with rest from other rest. In South America, these original people in Amazons, they did it for thousands of years, and it's called terra preta, and it's still there. It's still there. So you get rid of it.
I think though on this biochar, I mean that is true, and I think a bit of a mystery is still exactly how they did it. It was, very traditional indigenous technology, but one has to also be aware of the scales, and as everything, it's a minefield. I think there's been, again, very strong kinds of push it, well, interests in promoting biochar as a super large-scale solution to climate. And again, assuming, just like with BECCS and many other biofuels and so on and so forth, assuming land that doesn't exist for plantations to kind of, again, suck up carbon and put it into the ground. And of course, if you do this at a massive scale where it would actually have an impact on climate, you would have implications on soils, right? Like you put a lot of stuff into the soil. So I think for small scale, it's fine. And I know A2C, the magazine, is very, very, very keen on biochar as well. And I think that, to an extent, it's a traditional technology that can work beautifully. But then all of a sudden it gets sort of hijacked into this kind of big major technofix idea. And all of a sudden you run into the same problems as we've been talking about here in terms of, large scale forestry and many other things. So just to kind of be clear that it's a very contested kind of term. It has some potential, but also some major risks.
It's like with every other things that we have grown too big already.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
it's kind of. Yeah.
It will never be a huge part of a climate solution for sure.
No.
I think we need to look at climate solutions not in terms of that there is one silver bullet. Biochar is an interesting contributor to a very large puzzle, but I think that we've got to be careful about discarding or dismissing solutions. There isn't one golden one sitting out there. There are lots of small pieces, and we're going to need to be using every single one of them. So I think it's I would like to see research in biochar happening. I would also like to see people looking at how it actually does degrade, because we haven't actually done those experiments. We've seen that there are examples where it hasn't degraded. That's not quite the same as studying it and watching if it actually breaks down if you put it in the Swedish soil. And that kind of research needs to happen before we end up creating a time bomb. I think we need to look at every climate change solution extremely carefully.
Yeah, precaution.
Yeah, I was a bit wondering, I mean, the removal of carbon based on your idea, I think, I mean, even if we know that it has no negative impacts, I would only somehow do that at the end of the solutions, because still if you burn it and create heat, that's still a better solution than to use oil to create heat. So in a way, if you have completely replaced oil with something, I think then it might be time to think about removing carbon from biomaterial, but not before, because it's still better to burn that one instead of oil. But I think that's maybe why we had more time to do research into that, because we would not do it immediately, but it's maybe something which we might be able to do in the future.
Maybe later on. But the problem is that, well, we have to stop burning. we cannot differ between green and black, so to say, carbon dioxide molecules. They have the same effect on the atmosphere. So it's just continue to replacing the oil with another large impact. It's not time for that now.
No, and it's also money and markets and included. So when there's money in a thing, it's bound to go too big too soon.
Mm-hmm.
The issue of the green black issue. I mean, I've agreed with almost all. Well, I've not agreed. I've learned from much of your talk, Stig Olof. But the one thing that I'm not entirely comfortable with is the timescales issue. And the reason I'm not comfortable with it is that if I've understood you correctly, and you're absolutely, please correct me if I've got it wrong, that the big problem with cutting down trees is there's a time lag. You cut them down, you've got maybe 20 or 30 years before you're starting taking up the same amount of carbon again. That's a problem when you've got a timescale of 20 to 30 years to get the climate in order, probably less. I fully appreciate and respect that. My concern when we say that black and green carbon are the same is that the black carbon is from a geological process that takes millions of years to get back where it came from. So it's even worse. I'm not saying that green carbon is okay. I'm saying that we've got to be very, very careful when we're looking at those two cycles and saying green and black carbon are the same, because they're not really. The green carbon goes back into the cycle after 30 years. The black carbon goes into the cycle again after, well, one plate tectonic cycle, so say about 400 million years. It isn't. So I think I'm not saying that anything you said was wrong. I agree with you that the 20 to 30 years away, and that's one of the things I learned in your talk, what the problem was, that we have a 20 to 30 year time delay, which I kind of didn't know about, and I was kind of happy because that wasn't in my head, and now it's in my head, so I see we've got that problem to deal with as well. But the time scales, the same time problem is even worse for coal and oil and natural gas.
But the problem is that if we have the risk for crossing this climate tipping points, then it's too late.
I see what you're saying.
And it's relatively more important than to prevent that, than to the problem with adding more carbon from that has been stored for 300 million years to the ecosphere. I mean, if we have a method to, I don't really know how, the total impact in the atmosphere on the risk for crossing climate tipping point must be to avoid this must be the primary solution. What should think about? It's even more important. It's even more important because we are lost then.
I'm assuming that what you're saying is you're not saying that it's. I'm assuming you're not saying it's actually better to release CO2 from fossil fuels than to release it from burning trees, because there I would not agree. What I would say, but to use biofuels as a reason to get around switching to truly renewable sources like wind and solar, then I agree with you entirely. I mean, it's if biofuels are viewed as an alternative to solar power and wind power, that's a bad thing, because solar power and wind power don't have well, they do release carbon, but it's a lot less biofuels than biofuels. You're not actually saying that burning coal is okay. I'm not.
No, I don't say carbon, but I mean, wherever it comes from. I mean, oil or carbon or peat or old growing trees that don't take back the carbon in time. We have to put a kind of similar taxation on it.
I agree with everything, but the one other thing we have to be aware of is if we burn a piece of coal, there's absolutely no way of replacing it as putting that coal back in the ground. If we burn a tree, we can plant a tree. There is absolutely nothing we can do about a piece of coal. So I have a real concern about burning fossil fuels. I share your concern about burning trees a lot more after your talk than I did before it.
But if we take this example, no, it couldn't. I'm not sure about this, but if we take a theoretical example that we have a tipping point, and we have a solution that we avoid this tipping point by using more fossil fuels than biofuel energy, and it will be more efficient to avoid the tipping point. So after that we have avoided this tipping point is the most important thing.
Okay, so
You know,
we're talking about buying time.
This is just theoretical, but I have to put it in this way to make you to understand my idea about it. So it could, for a while, if we decrease the input of carbon and the output of carbon from the atmosphere must in a faster way by burning fossil fuels than by burning biofuels, then I would say it's the correct way. Because after this, after the tipping point, it's too late.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a hypothetical. I mean, you're making a theoretical point, but in practice,
this is a theoretical point. But it's just to explain the way I'm thinking.
I see how you're thinking. I think it's a very interesting way of thinking. No, I'm understanding you. I think one of the issues that I'm having with that way of thinking, however, is that you're talking about a tipping point at 2 degrees in the next 30 years or so. We're custodians of the earth for longer than the next 100 years. We're custodians of the earth until our species is eradicated, which hopefully will be a while. Once we've bought our 30 years, what happens then when we're burning fossil fuels? We still have the atmospheric problem. I can see you bias a window. I've got your argument. I've got to get my head around it. I can see maybe one could buy just a little bit of time. I feel instinctively, I feel super uncomfortable with it. And I would I feel very, very comfortable indeed about arguing for wind power, for solar power as a better alternative to biofuels. But the window argument for using biofuels and using fossil fuels instead of biofuels, I think it's still too short term. You buy yourself 30 years and then you're screwed.
It could be that. Could be that. We have to avoid polluting the atmosphere as much as we can.
Yes, we're totally agreed on that.
Yeah, so for someone who's not a scientist, who's just a normal person, a bit engaged in these questions, I think I've understood it like this. We have 10 years to halve our emissions. It takes at least 30 years for the trees to start growing up. Yeah. And we have 10 years. So we have to stop all carbon dioxide being burned, whether it comes from trees or carbon or oil, as soon as possible. Obviously, that is a naive and utopian way of wishing for the future to be. But to me, it's a bit crazy to discuss whether we burn coal or oil or trees, because it's all carbon dioxide going out in the atmosphere when we have to lower it, half it in 10 years time. So I can't really see, I can't get my head around it, actually. I can't see what the discussion is about. I'm too thick for that.
Yeah.
No, you put the finger on it, Toy. I think what you said is very, very wise. I think as always, observing scientists babbling, you're always the person who picks out the key message. Yeah, it's not. I mean, biofuels aren't going to solve the problem. That's clear. Not with a 30-year gap. Given that we need to be looking at, are there ways that we can reduce that gap? I think the way forward is to be looking at questions like that, because can we get that gap into a manageable time, that the window of buy different types of forestry, because I'm very, very worried. Where you're not going to hear Stig Olof and I agree is that I'm going to say it's okay to burn rocks. It's not going to happen. but I don't think Stig Olof would say that either. I mean, if we could, the obvious solution is that we switch entirely to renewables tomorrow. I mean, there is no other real solution. And I mean, even they have a fossil imprint, but it's at least smaller, a lot smaller. It's an order of magnitude smaller. So maybe if we want to keep the message simple, the message is just that we stick to renewables.
Yeah. No, that's it, right? But there's like there's double problem here with the burning of trees, right? Because you have and with the trees as a sort of the solution, because on the one hand, which I think you really communicated excellent here, Stig Olof, and as you reiterated, Alistair, the time. I mean, the time frame is the thing, and it's crazy that it's been sort of something that not everybody is aware of, and even very prominent folks in the game are not aware or taking that in. So then the idea that bio energy is sort of sustainable is led to continue. So that's one bit, right? And it's very, very clear, as you said, and it kind of disqualifies it. And as you said, it should be then actually regarded as in the same way as we look at fossil fuels, that burning of the tree will be having a real impact in the time span we're really kind of concerned about for now. But the other part too, again, is that this illusion of not just bioenergy, but also massive tree plantations and the kind of forestry we've been critiquing is at the core of a lot of now lofty, nice sounding claims for, corporations and countries saying that we're going to be net zero by 2050. And most of these are assuming carbon dioxide removal technologies of various sorts, including trees to a large extent, which doesn't add up. That surface area doesn't exist, even if you were okay with that kind of, massive plantation like scheme. So we have two kind of parallel problems, as I see it, with the discourse that you've been critiquing in terms of how we're dealing with forests, really, as my take on it, at least. But thanks a lot. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. I've learned a lot here also, as to think about afterwards. So, but to prevent some logging, I think it's very efficient. To plant trees takes also some time.
And when we plant them mixed.
Yeah.
That's what we learned. Does anyone have some more questions, or should we let Stig Olof, after 2 hours, off the hook?
But the PowerPoint, is that something you can make available? There was a lot of...
Yes, I can. If you send me an email, I will make a PDF. It's easier to send them than a PowerPoint. But I think you can still have the links there in a PDF, so you can go and look at the sources and so on, or how we have calculated these numbers and so on.
Stig Olof, there are quite a few researchers that couldn't be here today. So if you just use the mail group that is Researchers Desk for that PDF, I'm sure quite a few would be happy to see it.
Yeah.
As well, who's not here today.
Yeah.
Together with the film.
And I hope we can keep in contact a little and discuss, because it's much larger. I mean, we are natural scientists, yes, but we have to involve the social scientists and others also.
Can I ask?
Maybe could we somehow? Oh, sorry.
Go on, Freddie.
Could we somehow agree that biofuel is not a solution, but it can be helpful in some cases? I mean, basically, like forestry, we need to do that anyway. in the future. I mean, maybe we can do it in a better way, but still we need to do it. And there's always some leftover, the same for agriculture. And basically you can use some fraction of that for biofuel, but somehow you should only do that if you would do it anyway. So you should not plant anything just for the sake of using it as biofuel. Is that kind of something we could agree on?
Yes,
Well,
of course, the leftovers, so to say, twigs and branches. If for example, if we could log large trees, then it's better to use the remnants, of course, than to let it. But it's also a little problem with this that I'm not really sure about, because if you bring out the twigs and the leaves and so on, you also bring out a lot of nitrogen. And the growth of trees, and in boreal areas at least, they are limited by the amount of nitrogen in the ground. And if you burn it, those are emitted as nitro oxides from the chimneys. So in the ash, in the bio ash, it's no nitrogen. So even if you bring back the nitrogen, you cannot get back the growth of the trees that are lost for the next generation. Then you have to bring back a kind of fertilizers from what do you call it? From fabricated fertilizers, and it's also a big machine to do that. So it's also some other connections with this, you know.
And also, if you were able to power, say, the pulp industry with electricity rather than the bioenergy, and if you would be able to do as you were thinking here, using the black liquor, in a way capturing that and in some way turning it into something, store it away in some way, of course, then that's better than burning it, right? Because that actually starts to get a bit of removal in place as well. So I guess there's all these dimensions, right?
Yeah, it's a small pieces here that we have to go further and investigate more and involve. I mean, the engineers. Well, I'm just guessing things. But those engineers or chemists, they are also involved in. They are paid by the big Swedish forestry companies, so it's different to come in contact with them actually. I mean, I'm banned. I've tried to contact people also, but I'm a risk factor for the economy.
Yeah.
It is important, Stig Olof, that one's always fighting these battles from the inside. So we need to establish you as a friend of the industry, because I think we're going to succeed more that way. And success is what it's all about. We want to. You've got solutions and great ideas. That, I mean, many of these factories are now looking at how they're going carbon storage afterwards. And if you've got a brilliant idea, it needs to be shared. It needs to be out there. It needs to be tested, because if it doesn't work, well, fine, let's try a new idea. But we're not in a position at this point that we can just give up on ideas. We have got to use all the ideas we can. So let's work on that together. Stig Olof, I'm going to need to leave you. It's been, because I promised to eat my supper with the girls, and they're sitting there. And it's been absolutely brilliant. I've got your email address, and I'll be in touch afterwards.
Yeah. We'll be in touch. We'll be in touch.
Completely brilliant. Thank you very much for all the teaching. It's been great.
Thank you. Shall we say goodbye here? Any more questions?
I just think Me had something to say.
Okay, okay.
She wanted to say.
Yeah.
But it's more of a reflection. But I was wondering, I have seen in climate change channels, people are saying, "Oh, the government's climate plan is crazy because the biofuels route is not going to work." But has it been mainstream media? Because but my fear is that they kind of probably think that they've solved it all now by starting to use biofuels, and actually it's just going to accelerate the problem. Do they realize what they're doing? And if not, how can we catch their attention?
Yeah. As it's a barrier, we have to go through a kind of wall where the journalists also are a problem, I would say. They believe in what this table from this inventory report, for example. If they see these numbers on that we have a sink of 43 million tons, well, then it's sold. It's such things, and to break through this information problem, to get this message out, it's very difficult. I have tried. I've tried.
We should have invited some journalists to this speech as well. Just one last thing, very short, super short. Stig Olof, is your organization Fura still around?
No, well,
No.
It's long ago. It's long ago.
We should restart it.
No. We have to contact the large consumers of Swedish paper. That's one part of the solution.
And with that, dear friends, and thank you so much, Stig Olof. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Organizing it, Taya.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.